The morning after our anniversary, the city still smelled like wet stone and sugar. I kept rubbing the place on my collarbone where the pendant had warmed my skin last night, its weight a promise that had finally learned my name. Armand slept late, the way men do when they've told a story too well. Relaxed, like it will keep working without them. I left him with the clatter of the mocha pot and took the necklace with me, its diamonds small but exact. A sunrise concentrated. At the cafe, the window fogged itself into privacy. Then the door chimed, and she walked in. The gallery girl I'd seen laughing after openings. The one whose hair dares the air to be dull. On her throat hung my pendant, the same little sun, the same nick at the clasp I'd noticed with my thumb. The recognition was a soundless shatter inside my chest. She ordered without looking around, then turned, and we saw each other. My hand at my collarbone, her hand at her throat. I didn't say his name. That, too, felt like a gift I would be taking back. "I think you're wearing something of mine," I say, and even my voice sounds borrowed from a steadier woman. Lena's eyes flick to the pendant, then mine. She laughs the way people do when the coin lands in their palm, and they don't yet know it's counterfeit. "He said it was for me," she answers, and the word "he" doesn't need a name. The cafe supplies it like background music. We are not two women fighting over a trinket. We are two geographies discovering the same border fence with our hands on the wire. "It has a mark," I say, and I step close enough for her to see the crescent bite in the clasp. Her face opens, then shudders. We both look at the door as if Armand might blow in on a gust of weather and choose which of us the rune belongs to. "Who are you?" she asks. I swallow the ring of his last toast and say, "The person he promised to." She inhales, lips parting, and for the first time her gaze softens, not with pity, but recognition. The way mirrors greet each other. Back home, the apartment kept its practiced calm, the way staged homes do. Pillows eternally plumped, lemons in a bowl always auditioning for a commercial. Armand stood at the kitchen island slicing mango with the care of a surgeon who'd learned it empathy for fruit. "You're early," he said. Like time belonged to him too. I set my keys down, lean my notebook against the house-shaped keychain, and watch the blade catch light. "I met the gallery girl," I say. He looks up, smile reaching for its mark, then faltering mid-flight. "Lena?" He tries as if offering me the correct answer to a question I didn't study for. "She was wearing my necklace," I continue, and the word "my" lands between us with a sound I feel in my teeth. He says he can explain. The anthem of the unprepared. The mango tips onto the cutting board, juice bleeding gold into the maple. I think of stress tests, of which beams you can cut before the roof remembers gravity. "Please do," I say. And for once I don't hand him the blueprint for the escape route. He says he bought two. Twins from a jeweler eager for a story. "You liked it," he insists. And she needed something. The word "needed" stumbles, puts out its hands. I consider the logistics, receipts, dates, the impossibility of identical chips in identical clasps. I have spent a decade coaxing buildings to stand up. Lies have telltale leans. "Did you gift your need twice," I ask, "or did you gift mine away?" He scrubs a hand over his face, eyes going glossy with the kind of sincerity that stains. "It wasn't like that," he says. "Every man's favorite architect's sketch. Suggestive curves. The ugly parts unfinished." "Then show me the plans," I say. He looks at the pendant on the counter where I've set it, a sunken star. The silence between us is new. Not absence, but pressure. You can feel a wall right before you hit it. When I leave, I take the pendant and the receipt drawer with me. Photographs of paperwork fanning into my phone like feathers on a startled bird. I text Lena a time and a place. Neutral ground with good coffee and lousy acoustics for secrets. She replies too quickly, as if speed could qualify as truth. In the elevator, I watch my reflection multiply in the chrome, A hall of versions. The wife who forgives. The woman who burns it down. The girl who once mistook endurance for love. On the street. The rain has settled into a damp memory. The city smells like rinsed limes. I realize I am not hunting him. I am drafting myself. Acti is always about discovery, my professor used to say. He meant structures, but bodies have blueprints too. At the curb, a motorbike roars past, the rider laughing into the morning. I touch the pendant, mine, hers, ours, and feel its little sun refuse to warm my skin. Good. Let the light be cold. I need the edges sharp. Nor fee. Interest. The cafe they chose this time was smaller. Its walls the color of wet sand. Its silence brewed stronger than its coffee. Lena arrived first, twisting the pendant she hadn't returned, as if it could buy her forgiveness in advance. I watched from the doorway for a beat too long, measuring the slope of guilt on her shoulders. When I finally sat across from her, she said, "I didn't know." Her voice was a thread unspooling, thin but true. He told me it was new, that he'd picked it for me. I wanted to ask if she believed him, but the question would have been redundant. Belief had already cost both of us something. Between us, the diamond gleamed like a third witness, catching every tremor of light, recording. "Keep it," I said quietly. "You're the one he meant it for." The words felt like cutting through glass with my teeth. He called me 6 times before noon. I let the phone buzz itself hoarse on the counter. Its screen, lighting up his name like a fire alarm I refused to hear. Instead, I replayed Lena's words in my head. Her apology, her bewilderment, her youth. I had been her once, maybe not in age, but in the blind certainty that love is a reason, not a risk. By the 5th voicemail, his voice had softened into the pleading cadence of someone realizing the floor is gone beneath them. He said, "You're making a scene no one can see." I smiled, bitterly impressed. He always did understand invisibility as an art. I slipped my phone into the sink and turned the tap. The water hissed, and for a moment, I let it drown him out. When I finally saw Armand again, it was at his office. Glass walls, chrome edges, the kind of place built to reflect success back at itself. He looked smaller behind the expanse of transparency. "You humiliated me," he said, as though the betrayal had been mine. I told him the truth could only humiliate those who deserved it. His hand twitched, like a man reaching for a script I'd forgotten. I could almost pity him. His charm now a rusted instrument, every note off-key. He said he loved me, and the words sounded like a borrowed coat, too tight in the shoulders. I said nothing, because silence was finally fluent in the language we'd been speaking for years. Lena texted that she couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I met her again, not to compare wounds, but to measure sincerity. We walked by the beach, the sea foaming like a dog that had been chained too long. She said she didn't love him anymore, that she didn't know what love meant when it could overlap like shadows. "You're not the villain," I told her. And it was true. Just someone who forgot to ask whose story she was in. She laughed through a tear. The salt wind stung my eyes, or maybe that was my body finally releasing something too heavy for words. That night, the city went dark. A transformer failure, someone said. I lit a candle and watched its reflection multiply in the apartment window. One flame became 2, then 10, then 100 in the glass. The diamond pendant lay beside me on the table, finally motionless. I thought about how light travels, how even when extinguished, it keeps moving for years, stubborn, refusing to admit it's gone. Armand's voice, Lena's tears, my own restraint, they'd all been light, flung out in their own directions, still traveling towards something. I blew out the candle, and for the first time in months, the dark felt earned. 3 days later, the air itself felt bruised, Karachi's heat came heavy, pressing against glass and skin alike. Nadia had stopped answering calls, but silence didn't cool anything. It only concentrated it. She spent mornings drafting blueprints she never finished, every line bending toward a center she couldn't name. The pendant lay inside a ceramic bowl on her desk, its chain tangled like the wiring of a heart misconnected. Outside, the city sweated. Somewhere across town, Armand rehearsed apologies. Lena rehearsed forgetting. Heat has a sound. It hums like power lines on the verge of failure. Nadia listened to it until she couldn't tell if the noise was in the air or under her ribs. When the message finally came, it was short. I need to see you. One last time. No name, but none needed. The cafe was too public, the apartment too personal, so Nadia chose the gallery. Neutral ground now thick with ghosts. Lena was there, rearranging frames with the precision of someone trying to restore order to her life. The diamond pendant was gone. In its place hung a modest silver chain, understated, deliberate. He won't let go, Lena said. Nadia nodded. That's what people do when they realize what they've broken. They clutch the shards and bleed. For a moment, both women stood before a painting of an empty chair by a window. The label read, Absence, Mixed Media. Nadia exhaled. It's time someone left the frame. Armand arrived at the gallery that evening, uninvited. His shirt stuck to his back, his eyes raw from sleeplessness. You've both made me into a villain, he began, voice too loud for the hushed space. Nadia's calm sliced through it. You did that yourself, she said. Lena stepped back, as if watching an eclipse she couldn't stop. Armand's breath shook. He looked at the painting, at the pendant missing from Lena's throat, at the life he no longer recognized. I thought I could love two versions of myself, he said. Turns out I can't stand either. The air between them shimmered with heat and honesty, the kind that burns but also sterilizes. Nadia didn't answer. She just walked past him, the scent of rain still clinging to her skin like proof of change. Outside, night heat rose from the pavement like ghosts of day. Nadia walked until the city blurred, until even her name felt lighter in her mouth. She stopped at a pedestrian bridge overlooking a tangle of headlights. Everything moved. Everything glowed. She realized she wasn't angry anymore. Anger was still a tether. She was something else now, spacious, unanchored, a body rediscovering its own weather. When her phone vibrated again, she didn't even look. The sound folded into the city's pulse, another note in a long song of release. A week later, the gallery mailed her the painting. Absence, a gift from Lena, unsigned. Nadia hung it in her workspace, above the table where the pendant used to sit. She started a new design. A small community library. Open walls to let in wind and sound. For once, her lines didn't seek perfection. They sought breath. She thought of Armand somewhere in the city, learning how silence sounds when no one waits to break it. She thought of Lena, painting again, her colors no longer borrowed. Nadia's pen paused midline, and she smiled. Heat breaks things open, but sometimes that's how light gets in. The monsoon came early that year, loud and uninvited. Nadia watched the city drown in light, remembering the weightless silence that used to mean safety. She had built a life from symmetry, but love had always entered through the cracks. Rain drummed against her studio roof, steady as pulse. Each drop rewrote the blueprints stacked on her desk. She realized design was only the illusion of control. Water always found a way. Outside, thunder stitched the sky together and ripped it apart again. Armand's mother had once told him that men inherit silence the way others inherit property. He visited her now, the hospital room soaked in antiseptic light. She asked about Nadia, about the company, about whether he still slept. He lied 3 times before realizing she was half asleep. "You think success will forgive you," she murmured. "It never does." When she drifted off, he sat watching the monitor's steady rhythm and felt how unnatural constancy could be. For the first time, he wanted something to stop so something else could start. Lena had moved to a smaller apartment near the port. Salt lived in the curtains. She painted from dawn till exhaustion, canvases leaning like witnesses against the walls. Each new piece featured light breaking through something. A door, a wave, a woman's throat. A critic stopped by and asked if they were self-portraits. "All of them," she said. Her laughter sounded less like defense, more like discovery. She was learning that art doesn't heal. It translates pain into something you can live with on your wall. Months later, Nadia received a call from Arman. Not pleading this time, just a request. "Help me design something honest. Against sense." She agreed to meet. They chose a half-finished building by the sea. Concrete ribs exposed to wind. He spoke of turning it into a public workspace, transparent walls, open courtyards. "No. Hiding places," he said. She smiled, the irony gentle. For 2 hours they discussed structure, not history. The sea roared below, forgiving no one but listening to everyone. When they left the site, the tide was climbing. Nadia stayed behind a moment, watching the water reclaim the sand. She realized every story repeats the same motion: advance, retreat, reshape. Back home, she opened her journal and wrote a single line: "Some fires purify." The next morning, the first rays slid over the city's drenched rooftops, finding her window, touching the painting absence until it gleamed alive. Again, the night of the gallery opening began like a held breath. Karachi's sky shimmered with heat, the air alive with the thrum of generators and perfume. Nadia hadn't planned to attend, yet something in her refused distance. Some need to watch the story finish itself. The exhibition was titled Reclamation. Inside, spotlights skimmed canvases thick with color and confession. Arman stood near the entrance, thinner now, his smile subdued to survival. When their eyes met, it was a recognition older than remorse. The hum of conversation folded around them, polite, practiced. A reporter asked Nadia what she thought of the art. She said, "It looks like honesty, finally learned color." And for the first time in months, she didn't flinch. Lena found Nadia first. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, voice a little breathless, both proud and shy. Nadia smiled, the gesture weightless. "You painted the truth," she answered. "It deserves witnesses." They walked the perimeter of the room together, 2 currents finding parallel flow. On one wall hung heat map, a cascade of reds bleeding into white. Lena's rendition of confrontation. Nadia paused before it. "It's strange," she murmured, "how beauty grows out of what we thought would ruin us." Lena looked at her, eyes wet but shining. "I owe you the color," she whispered. "No," Nadia corrected softly. "You owe yourself the courage." Around them, applause rose for someone's speech. Yet neither woman moved. The moment was its own language. Arman approached as the lights dimmed for the curator's remarks. The crowd hushed. A microphone crackled. "These works," the curator said, "speak of transformation." Arman's hand brushed Nadia's sleeve. A reflex, a plea. She turned slowly. "You once told me love was architecture," she said under the murmur. "Maybe it was demolition," he swallowed, eyes catching the spotlight's edge. "I'm trying to rebuild," he said, "without stealing anyone's foundation." For a second, compassion almost returned. Then she remembered the weight of absence that built her strength. "Then start somewhere no one has to collapse for you," she said. The curator's applause ended their silence. Armand's hand fell back to his side, empty, learning distance. Later, the power flickered, the city reminding everyone who was truly in charge. For an instant, the gallery plunged into semi-darkness. Only emergency lights painted faces in red. Gasps fluttered, then laughter. But in that dim heartbeat, Nadia saw it. The diamond pendant, now mounted in glass among Lena's smaller pieces, labeled Relic of Belief. Its fractured clasp glinted under a beam. People thought it symbolic. Only 3 knew it was real. The light returned. Lena's eyes met hers across the room, questioning. Nadia nodded once, a benediction. The necklace belonged to history now, and history was best displayed, not worn. Somewhere inside her, something unlatched, letting the past breathe its last. When the event ended, the city smelled of cooled rain on concrete. Nadia stepped out alone, heels clicking through puddled light, the gallery's laughter thin behind her, replaced by the distant hush of waves. She loosened her hair. The night wind threading through it like new language. The skyline shimmered. A constellation of windows, some open, some dark. She thought of Armand's unfinished workspace by the sea, of Lena's next exhibition, of herself, not as aftermath but origin. At a crosswalk, the signal changed. The world moved on cue. She did too. Tomorrow she'd return to her designs, to the small library rising from blueprints into brick. She'd name it the Light Room, and if anyone asked why, she'd say, because even ash can shine. Morning came with a chalk-white sun bleaching the city of color. The gallery's banners still fluttered on the street, damp and curling at the edges. Nadia woke to silence, that strange cousin of peace. Her phone blinked with messages she didn't open. Congratulations, invitations, apologies. She brewed tea instead, the air heavy with cardamom and aftermath. On her desk, the sketch for the light room waited. She traced the first line, steady this time, not as control but as promise. The city outside exhaled. Even the pigeons sounded new. She realized healing wasn't a crescendo. It was repetition. The courage to begin ordinary days again. Across town, Armand walked a construction site that once belonged to their shared plans. The sea wind tugged at the safety tape. Gulls screamed like laughter stripped of humor. Workers nodded, kept building. He ran a hand over concrete still damp from curing and thought of all the structures he'd raised that never learned endurance. A foreman asked about specifications, and Armand caught himself answering with care. Maybe that was redemption, precision without audience. For the first time, the hum of machinery didn't drown his thoughts, it steadied them. The building would stand, whether or not his name stayed on the plate. Lena returned to the gallery after the cleanup. The space smelled of varnish and endings. She moved between blank walls, imagining what would fill them next. The pendant display case remained, empty now, a rectangle of reflected light. She touched the glass once, then turned away. Outside, students waited to interview her for a small art magazine. She smiled easily, unguarded. When one asked what inspired her, she said, "Leaving room for what survives the fire." The words surprised her. They felt lighter than explanation. She realized the story was no longer about him or even about her. It was about what refused to stop glowing. That evening, Nadia visited the unfinished library site. The foundation trench had filled with rainwater that mirrored the bruised sky. She crouched and skimmed her fingers along the surface. Ripples carried the light outward. A child from a nearby street approached, asked what she was building. "A place for stories," she said. "Ones that don't end with fire." The child grinned, uncomprehending but pleased, and skipped away. Nadia watched the reflections settle back into stillness. It looked like a page waiting for ink. For the first time, she felt not the loss, but the space it left. A room she could inhabit. Night closed with a dry breeze that carried faint salt from the sea. In his apartment, Armand turned off the lights and let the dark be what it was, unnegotiated. Lena painted under a single bulb until color overflowed the canvas. Nadia wrote an inscription for the library corners to beginnings that survived their endings. Across the city, power lines hummed, rain gutters ticked, life recalibrated. None of them would meet again soon, but their absence had already taught them intimacy's truest form, recognition without possession. The camera would find Nadia one last time, closing her window, her face half in shadow, half in peace. 5 years later, Karachi had learned new rhythms. The city's skyline rose higher, but the air after rain still smelled the same, like memory trying again. The light-room library stood at the edge of the old district, its walls breathing open to wind and chatter. Nadia, now 42, moved among the shelves, adjusting a display of donated books. Children's laughter stitched the quiet into something tender. She ran a hand along a beam inscribed with the library's motto, "Because even ash can shine." For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel pride without apology. A volunteer asked, "Were you an architect?" Nadia smiled. "Still am," she said. "Just building different rooms." Across the city, Lena, 36, taught painting in a small studio above a cafe. Her students filled the room with chatter and the sweet smell of turpentine. On one wall hung her series Resilience, abstract waves shifting from scarlet to blue. Reporters sometimes asked if the collection was autobiographical. She would answer, "Every color is." After class, she stayed behind, cleaning brushes with the patience of ritual. The sun hit the glass jar of turpentine, scattering light across the walls. She laughed quietly at how beauty still surprised her. Outside, the wind carried the sound of children reading in a library not far away. Armand, 45, now oversaw a modest engineering firm specializing in public projects, bridges, flood drains, the unglamorous arteries that kept a city alive. His hair had silvered. His gestures slowed. One evening he paused on a footbridge his team had finished, watching headlights ribbon across the bay. He thought of the library by the district edge and of the woman who designed it. Regret still lived somewhere quiet in him, but it had softened, become gratitude for having known a better blueprint. He whispered to the wind, "Thank you," unsure to whom. The tide below answered in language older than forgiveness. At the light room's anniversary, Nadia and Lena crossed paths again. No orchestration, no tension. Just two women meeting amid the murmur of pages and soft rain outside. "It's beautiful," Lena said, looking around. "You made something that keeps growing." Nadia gestured to the windows. "So did you." They laughed, surprised by how lightness fit between them now. When the rain strengthened, they stepped under the same awning, sharing a silence that felt complete. The past no longer asked to be discussed. It simply existed, folded neatly into who they'd become. As night fell, the city's power flickered once and steadied. From the library roof, Nadia watched the lights ripple across neighborhoods, endless constellations of ordinary lives. She thought of every version of herself. The woman who endured, the one who burned, the one who rebuilt, and felt them merge into something whole. A warm wind rose, carrying laughter from the streets below. She whispered, "Borrowed light returned." The camera pulled back, over the roof, over the city, until the glow of Karachi became a galaxy against the dark. The world kept humming, unchanged yet somehow redeemed.